Well, thank you, everybody. It was probably a combination of Jack and the Jaguar that got me in that ride to make friends with Jack. I am going to give you a presentation on a accumulation of 20 years of being a clinician, a technologist, and a philosopher a little bit. In college at University of California, Berkeley, I studied philosophy and physiology. And in philosophy, philosophers try to get the question right. And in physiology, we try to get the answer right. And a lot of people in science and engineers really want to get the right answer and show how great they are at the answer. But if you have the wrong question and you get the right answer to the wrong question, where are you? You know, where are we? And so I look at, and I'm constantly asking questions as I go through the field of medicine and every interaction I have. I'm an internist. I take care of adults. I try to keep people healthy. So I want to start with a little story of this woman here. It's actually not her. It's a stock photo. But 1 year out of training in San Francisco, I was called to see a woman with diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, not well. She was staying at a friend's house. They asked me to do a house call. She was with her husband on their way to their 50-year anniversary cruise in Thailand, and they were just laying over in San Francisco for a day. I evaluated her with the best of my skills, and she said she ate some oysters that may not have been good. It seemed like food poisoning of some sort. So I gave her IV fluids in her room with her husband. We chatted for an hour because I was there for an hour. She was lovely. They told me their whole story. And then I left. And 4 hours later, I got a phone call I got paged back before cell phones. I got a page that this patient was in the ICU and arrived at the hospital brain dead on arrival, 3 hours after I saw her, maybe 4. And I was a new doctor, and I was trembling. I didn't know what happened. What did I do? Went through my head. So after about 10 hours of talking to the ICU doctors, talking to her husband, she was dead, and we pulled the plug. And I called my father, who was a surgeon, who really wanted me to be a doctor growing up, and I said, hey, Dad, I can't do this anymore, man. I think I just killed somebody, or I had some hand in somebody dying within a very short period of time. And he said, son, as only a surgeon could say, you're not a real doctor until you've filled a graveyard. And I was like, Dad, that's not really that's not helping me right now. That's not helping me. And what makes matters worse is when you die within 24 hours of the hospital, it's a homicide investigation. So I was a suspect in a homicide. And this was 1 year out of school. Out of training, and I literally was a hot mess. I could do nothing. I was paralyzed in my home, I couldn't do it. And I thought, I'm going to go to jail, and I didn't. Anyway, the long story short was she wound up having metastatic colon cancer that had eaten through her colon. Who could have known, right? It was a complex late-stage disease. No matter what happened, that was going to happen. But I tell you this story because medicine is not just algorithms and all these things. There's a lot of humanity and a lot of emotions that go into every patient interaction. This is a significant one. So today I'd like to talk about the Hippocratic Oath. I took it. All clinicians take it. We go through our training in medical school. Now, this is a draft framework. It's a relatively bold thing I'm going to present at the end, which is a new Hippocratic Oath and how we should think about it. But I want to run through first, I don't know where to point this thing, a brief history of medicine. So thousands of years ago, these were our healers. They were shamans. They were medicine men. I call this pre-modern medicine. These people would help people in various clans and tribes that were nomadic or gypsies running around the world. And at some point, some other folks got involved and started helping people, but while they were helping them, they wound up hurting them in the process of helping them because we didn't really have any science. And that's when this guy came along, Hippocrates, and said, hey, you know what? While we're helping people, we should try not to hurt them. And he came up with the original Hippocratic Oath. So the Hippocratic Oath's goals, are, do no harm. I'm going to try to read, because you can't see this maybe. Help people get the best outcomes, alleviate suffering, bring dignity to illness, and respect privacy and confidentiality. Those are the high-level bits and pieces of the Hippocratic Oath. Shortly thereafter, one of my favorites, Voltaire, came along and said, the art of medicine is to keep your patient in a good mood while nature takes its course. So that's just which I gravitate to that one. I think levity is important. Fast forward to the late 1900s and early 2000s as Röntgen and Alexander Fleming invented the X-ray machine and the penicillin. And all of a sudden, we're in early modern medicine. We can now see things we've never seen before with X-rays, and we can treat things we've never treated before with antibiotics. Pretty cool. And then we go fast forward to today. Now we're in modern medicine. This is the modern X-ray version. And we've got like incredible sophistication. And by the way, in order to take that little X-ray and get to this, billions and billions of dollars have been invested by capitalists in industry that actually are far removed from medicine. They're building technology. They're building things. And this is the modern day pharmaceutical company. These things are huge at scale, billions of dollars. It's modern medicine. This is the Texas Medical Center. These are all hospitals and clinics. This is like, I don't know, like a few miles square round. And it's the largest medical place in the world. But this is modern medicine in its full instantiation. This is how the government views medicine. This is in the United States, and by the way, it's not too different than the NHS, because I have versions of the NHS graphs. This is just the regulatory framework of how information and rules and regulations flow. This is not an ecosystem. This is a freakosystem. Meaning if you have some business idea and you think you're just going to come in and sell it like in finance or consumer anything, you got to run through that gauntlet. And so this is what it's like to be a doctor today. You are trying to take off and land this many planes at the same time. And we are doing a crappy job in every country in the world. So I want to talk about companies for a minute, because companies are the major force here. What are corporate goals? Companies and CEOs, they take an oath to shareholders, right? And the oath they take to shareholders is more is better, growth is good, and higher margins are always good. That's the oath. They don't care about anything else. I mean, they do, but they don't. So this is the NHS budget over the last, I don't know, 50, 60 years, right? It's not going down. It's pretty much going straight up. This is the budget for medications. I think this is prescription medications in the UK. It's just going straight up. So we're prescribing more drugs. We're spending more money. This is Stryker. This is, they sell hospital beds and devices. This is their revenues over the last 20, 30 years. This is other devices and orthologics, and those things are going straight up. So lots of money is being spent in healthcare, a ton of money, and it's eating into politics. It's eating into the environment. It's eating into everything. So how are we doing? The lifespan is going down in the UK for the first time ever. The average, it's been going up and up and up, and finally it's going down. And how are we doing? Oh, people who are satisfied with healthcare in the UK, way down. People who are somewhat satisfied, way down. People who are unhappy, way up. So, that's kind of odd. We're spending all this cash, and we're getting like shitty outcomes. So what are we doing? This is a cartoon that I commissioned, which is what everybody talks about in healthcare is we need good outcomes, we need a lower cost, and we need a better experience. But if you look at who the actors are, the main actors are, you got the capitalist counting the loot, you got the technologist all excited with his technology, and then you have the doctor who's just totally struggling to make ends meet between these two actors. So another quote by Upton Sinclair, which I think you'll enjoy, is, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. Okay? So these are the forces that are at play here in the world. And so I was doing a talk on prevention recently, and there's just different levels of prevention that are classification. There's primary prevention, there's secondary prevention, there's tertiary prevention, and then I stumbled upon a new one. It's called Quaternary Prevention. Has anybody heard of Quaternary Prevention? Okay, so primary prevention is don't smoke, wear seatbelts, prevent things that could happen to you, the vaccinations, these are primary prevention. Secondary prevention is you have high cholesterol, you're at risk for a heart attack, so we want to prevent that, so we're going to give you a statin or change your diet. That's secondary prevention. Tertiary prevention is you've had a heart attack, and now we want to prevent you from getting another one, so we're going to be super aggressive with our prevention. And then there's quaternary prevention. Let me read it out loud. Methods to mitigate or avoid results of unnecessary or excessive interventions in the healthcare system. So guess what? We are doing harm again. And this is why we need a new Hippocratic Oath. We are spending too much money and we are hurting people. And And there's just misalignment. So I want to briefly talk about humans. So humans are not digital. They are analog. And when you're dealing with the human, you have to understand this analog framework. And I'll get into this a little bit more. And the language that we use today in technology that I hear all over is we need to put the patient in the center. They're consumers. They're not patients. We need to empower the consumers in healthcare. Consumer-driven healthcare. If you haven't heard of this stuff, it's all over the map. This is a consumer to me, okay? This is somebody who looks like a consumer. This is somebody who looks like a patient. So I want to be really clear on the language we use, because language is the root way of us understanding everything in our mental frameworks, and we all have different ones. So to somebody who's sick and anxious, this is their field of vision. This is their field of vision. And someone who's a consumer, this is their field of vision. So if you're designing some consumer something and you're designing it for this guy, well, actually you're dealing with this guy. And so you're going to get it wrong. And I spent a whole decade designing a digital health company that tried to engage with patients through this mechanism I call digital empathy. How do you develop digital empathy? And so I want to briefly talk about the fundamental difference between consumers and patients, so I'm crystal clear and there's no question about it. You find consumers shopping, you find patients in a clinic or a hospital. You find consumers have choices. Patients don't have a lot of choices. They have limited options. If you have hip pain, it's like 3 things we can do for you. It's not like you can go to the store and pick out 1,000 things. And then you're usually at a clinic where the doctor is only going to give you 1 or 2. You have free will if you're a consumer. You can decide to spend the money that you earned on whatever you want. You can buy that drink at the bar or not. But when you're a patient, you can't not make a decision. You have tethered will. You are stuck to a decision that you may or may not want to make. And the consumer is excited as they go through life, and they're going to trade the resources they earned for something that they didn't have before, where patients are anxious. And if we talk about anxiety, and I won't go into the neuroscience of it too much, but the limbic system and the amygdala is where the sympathetic nervous system arises. And when you're anxious, blood flow to the prefrontal cortex decreases, and your logic models that exist in consumer land don't exist anymore. So if you're trying to design for prefrontal cortex, normal, rational consumers, you're going to be wrong. And the other thing is when you're a consumer and you buy that beer, you now have something you didn't have before. It is additive. When you are a patient, you are trying to get rid of something, whether it's cancer, nausea, pain. And so I tell you, where else do you find yourself paying somebody to get rid of something? Okay? The garbage man? The divorce lawyer? The pest control guy? I don't know. But there's not a lot of places in this world where you will pay someone to get rid of something for you. So if you're building something for patients, remember, they're trying to get rid of something. They're not trying to get something. They want to live their life. Whoa. And the other thing is with consumer land, you get some immediate feedback loop, and in patients, sometimes you don't. So this is just a kind of a simple decision model of a patient. This is what's going on in their head. It's the if model. And there's just no right answer. Everything is rooted in uncertainty. So now let me pivot a little bit to technology. Technology is great. We all have iPhones. We're all interested in how this is going to work. And I come from Silicon Valley in San Francisco, where like you can't go anywhere without bumping into something. And as a physician, I do take care of a lot of the leaders of a lot of the technology companies in Silicon Valley. They've joined my group. And their thing is, hey, let's move fast and break things. Let's go and disrupt. That's what we do here in Silicon Valley. Wait a minute. Maybe we should move slow and not kill people, because technology in healthcare it's two-sided. It can do well, but if you get some algorithm wrong or you do something a little bit off-piste, you're going to cause harm, and you're only going to find out about it later. And so we just have to be really mindful of that. Now, what am I excited about? There's a ton of risk management tools where algorithms and technology can really help. Because I guarantee you, if I ask everybody in this room, do you want to live for 20 more years? The answer is going to be yes. If I ask you what your strategy is for that, you're going to say, well, I eat well, I exercise, those are tactics. In order to have a strategy to live a long and healthy life, you need to understand what the portfolio of risks are in your metabolic and organ systems, and then you need to monitor them regularly, because at any one time you could go off the track and wind up not living for 20 years because you just went to go see a doctor once a year. Bananas. That is like nobody would make an investment in anything and only look at data once a year. But humans, that's just how we've always done it. And ultimately, with these risk management tools, you can figure out which one you are you're not a population, you're an individual. Every major study is done on populations. And so we have to get to this personalized medicine so you can understand your risk and develop a strategy. The other thing that technology is really good for is eliminating false positives, which happen all the time. And I'm excited about the false positive aspect of where technology can come in and really kind of risk stratify and clean up a lot of the mistakes that are made in medicine. So where is AI being used now that's good? Well, anything that ends in oscopy is going to be the first place that AI goes, because oscopy means there's a camera and there's images, and those can be looked at by pixelations, by algorithms and massive computers, and they can find things that the human eye will probably miss. So there's a company, I can't remember the name of it, but they can look at x-rays now, and they can find things that the human eye would have missed completely. And so that will decrease false positive rates, and it will also decrease false negative rates. Also, there's a new algorithm being developed to listen to children's coughs to tell you what the bug is based on the type of cough, based on the inflammation that exists in their vocal cords. Cool, right? There's all sorts of cool things for technology. And so I don't want to, I'm excited about it, but I want to go back. So let's not talk about the technology algorithm, and let's talk about the human algorithm for a minute. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We are endowed with biases, lots and lots of biases. And I study in my spare time behavioral economics, and we don't act rationally even when we're consumers. We have so many biases, and if you don't understand biases, I really think everybody should go dig in and read about every single one of these biases that exist to realize how messed up our brains work. But it's served us well in evolving through complex systems and complex tribes over the years. So, the Hippocratic Oath, coming to the punchline here. This is the Hippocratic Oath, the vows that most physicians and clinicians take, whether they take them explicitly on stage at their medical school graduation, or they take them implicitly because they're just a respiratory tech at a hospital and they didn't really take an oath, but they're there because they want to help people. I mean, it's the passion for compassion. That's what ultimately drives people to go into this humanity of the healing arts. I'm not going to read these out loud, but I'll let you all just quickly take a look at them. And so the ethical premises of this are, this is non-maleficence, which is given an existing problem, it may be better not to do something or even do nothing than risk causing more harm than good. In our practice, patients come to us, say, doctor, don't just stand there, do something. Like, I've got this problem. And we'll say, wait a minute, maybe we don't just do something, let's just stand there for a minute. Let's be okay with what this is and not do something, because the risks of doing something, there's always a risk to doing something, and there's also a risk to doing nothing. Often the risk to doing nothing is less than the risk of doing something, but you know what? We don't get paid for doing nothing. We only get paid for doing something. And that creates a moral hazard that's permeated every layer of every realm of medicine. Then there's beneficence, which is basically do no harm. It comes in a couple different flavors. There's autonomy, which is the freedom to make decisions without external influence, corporate influence, hospital influence, whatever it is, and the capacity to act in accordance with your objective morality. This is like a North Star moral compass thing that we all have, the real healers have. And the last one is fairness, is the impartial and just treatment with or without favoritism or discrimination. So, the big idea that I'm about to present to you now, which is a draft framework for a new Hippocratic Oath, and who am I? I'm just this guy from San Francisco, so I don't know that, that it's real or not, but it's really to start a conversation and have a meaningful conversation. And the key element that I want to drive home is right now, clinicians take the Hippocratic Oath. You know who doesn't take the Hippocratic Oath? Engineers, hospital CEOs, insurance companies, politicians, pharmacy CEOs. Nobody does. It's just the people that are helping the people face to face. So I think the new Hippocratic Oath needs to be taken by everybody. If you want to be in the arts of the healing arts, if you want to be in that space where there is trillions of dollars sloshing around, you should take this oath. So this is just a draft framework. And so I'll go through, I think I have like 7 principles, and then I'll conclude my talk, and we can have a nice panel discussion about it. So the one is, first, I will endeavor to understand what matters to the patient and actively engage them in shared decision making. I do not own the patient nor their data. I am a trusted custodian. Okay? What does this mean? We just tell patients, you have this, here's what you're going to do. We do not go over shared decision making with people. We do not present them the options and the risks for every decision because it's inefficient. But because of that inefficiency, we do harm. And we need to start thinking it's okay to be inefficient to do no harm. It means that people will make less money. So there's all sorts of problems in that concept, but we have to start getting our head around that concept. And by the way, so this is kind of empathy and privacy. I put these little kind of things at the top that I think what these principles embody. Second, I will focus on good patient care to make my profits. If I can't do well by doing good and prove it with outcomes, I don't belong in the field of the healing arts. And this is altruism. This is like, I'm in this to do good and to help humanity. If you're just here to clock the dollars or the pounds or the euros and like you don't really care what happens on the other end, you should get the hell out of here because you're doing nobody any good. And you're really hurting patients and you're ruining the lives of a lot of people so that you can have a little more money. The third, I shall be transparent and interoperable. I shall allow my outcomes to be peer reviewed. Okay? So this is transparency and interoperability, which doesn't happen at all today because nobody cares. They're just making their money, and the more uninteroperable they are, the more money they make because they're siloing things. And in medicine, when I want to, if I'm a scientist, I have to publish a study and I have to have it peer reviewed. I think everything should be peer reviewed at the corporate level, at all levels of healthcare. We should not just hold the physicians to that standard. It's wrong. Fourth, I will enable my patients the opportunity to opt in and to opt out of all data sharing with non-essential medical providers at every instance. Okay? Right now, data is oil. It's like, it's the new oil in healthcare. Everyone's trying to collect the data. They're trying to hoard it. They're not sharing it. If they shared it, we would have more insights by more people to get better outcomes. And so I believe that, and patients don't even know where their data is going. So like, rather than try to like figure out the conundrum of who owns the data, just let the people decide. Let the people decide. It's their data. It's their life. Fifth, I will endeavor to change the language I use to make healthcare more understandable. Less Latin, less paternal language, and I will cease using acronyms. What do I mean by that? If you're trying to explain something to someone and you're using acronyms or Latin, there's no literacy. They have no idea what you're talking about, and they are unable to make a real decision based on what you're talking about because they don't understand it. You lost them. You had me at like diabetes. Does anybody know what diabetes means? What does it mean? The word. What does the word diabetes mean? Sweet urine. No, it means siphon because people used to pee a lot in Greece when they saw, and so most of the names of medicines are in Latin and we don't even know what they mean. And by the way, if I was going to rename diabetes today, not type 1 where you get it from a virus and it's an immune response, but the majority of the burden of the healthcare costs in this country are and all around the world are type 2 diabetes, I would call it the overconsumption of processed food disease. So that I didn't get diabetes, I actually gave it to myself. And there's a certain different language that's required, so you have to name diseases by what causes them in English, not by what happened to them afterwards in Latin. It creates a huge gulf of literacy and understandability. So I kind of a linguist in my spare time, so this really matters to me. Language really matters. Sixth, I will make all decisions as though the patient was in the room with me and I had to justify my decision to them. And I have a friend who runs a hospital system, and it was really going down the crapper. Morale was low, and he just said, hey, look, every decision at every level, boardroom, clinical teams, just imagine there was a patient sitting right next to you as you made the decision that you made, and you had to justify it to them. And what happened was everybody started to had this invisible patient in the room, and as they talked about it, they had a whole different decision-making process because the patient was right there, the invisible one. So I think that actually it was a fascinating exercise. Now the hospital's totally turned around, morale's up, outcomes are better, people are feeling good. But we don't normally do that because we're usually stuck in our own head with our own business decision or whatever we have in front of us, and we don't ask if the patient was, if they were there, how would they respond to this decision that we just made? And again, I'm not talking about medical decisions, corporate decisions. And and seventh, I will make technology, including artificial intelligence algorithms that assist clinicians in medical decision making, peer reviewable. I do believe that if you've got some secret sauce algorithm that you think's great, well then show it to the other people in medicine and get that peer reviewed, because how can you trust an algorithm if other people can't understand it? Because that's the whole point of it, is I got my proprietary algorithm. Whenever I see that, I want to vomit. Because, well, why don't you make that, you can still license it, you can still have the IP to it. I mean, there's copyright laws. Like, you get to listen to everyone's song, they didn't, So I do think we need to open this up a little bit and make it peer reviewable. And I think this is my last one, which is eighth, I will deputize everyone in my organization to surface any violations of this oath without penalty. And I will use open source artificial intelligence as the transparency tool to monitor this oath in my organization. And so you can imagine some CEO saying, I will take these oaths, Jordan. I like this new oath. My company's going to do this. But guess what? They say it, it's lip service. They go off caring and doing what they're going to do. And I believe that with social media, with companies like Glassdoor, with all these companies that enable people to kind of anonymously whistleblow on BS that's happening, if someone makes an oath, they should be held to the standard of that oath, and they should tell everybody in the organization, hold me accountable, and hold yourself accountable. And so there should be a whole, I envision a place where you go to some site where every company and how many people are whistleblowing on their boss or on their teams and whatever, saying like they're not doing this. It's all about the money, and they haven't restructured their entity. So I'll close with a final quote by John Muir, who discovered California and the Pacific Northwest in the United States. He was kind of a naturalist and a discoverer, which is, when you tug on a single thing in nature, you realize it's connected to everything else. And what you do, whatever you do it is connected to healthcare. And everything you do in healthcare is connected to everything else. And so we can't think of things in our own little domain. We really need to zoom out a little bit and understand the impact that what we're doing is going to have on the thing in front of us, the thing adjacent to that. And if you play chess, or you can think a little bit broader, how does it impact other things? And I think if you can really kind of instantiate those adjacencies, you will develop something amazing. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Perfect. Huge thanks to Jordan and minus 10 points for going over for so long. So can I invite all the other speakers up to the stage, if we can move up quickly and we can get going. So first up we have Cosima Gretton, who is not representing Mindstrong, but is the clinical and product manager at Mindstrong Health. Ben Fehnert, who is the co-founder at Ctrl Group. Euan Gardner, who is a senior information development manager at NHS Scotland. See, real people have real job titles. And Mark Davies, who is the CMO at Watson Health for IBM. So can we have a huge round of applause for our panelists? So can we just have a quick whip round? Can you introduce yourself, your organisation, what you do there, and like every panel, a wee fun fact. Go ahead, Euan.
My name is Euan Gardner. I work for NHS Scotland on developing synthetic data for release to industry and researchers. A fun fact is I used to have hair halfway down my back, black fingernails, and played in heavy metal bands.
That's a good one.
Nice. I'm Cosima Gretton. I'm a doctor trained in the NHS, and I now lead the clinical product development for Mindstrong. So we use patterns in the way that you swipe and tap on your phone to measure cognitive function, and we embed that into basically a new program for mental health care for patients with serious mental illness, allowing them 24/7 access to care and helping them stay out of the hospital. And the fun fact, I guess, it's a tough one. I am about to get a motorbike license, so this might be the last time you see me.
Hi, my name is Ben Fehnert. I'm interested in the role of technology and human-centered insights to improve healthcare and society, and I co-founded a business called Control Group, and we use software to run elements of clinical research and care pathways. So,
You're on.
am I on? Audible? Okay. So, fun fact. So, I'm now a fact checker, probably in part. Is it now on now? Okay. Probably in part because I believed a Newsround article in 1985 on the 1st of April that stated that spaghetti grows on trees and told everyone about it, and it was mercilessly mocked by my brothers for years.
Nice.
Tough. So my name is Mark Davies. As we said, I'm the Chief Medical Officer for IBM. So I cross IBM Incorporate and Watson Health. I'm responsible for Europe, Middle East and Africa. My background is a physician, a family physician, general practitioner in the sunny world of Yorkshire, and I spent a lot of time working for government around digital and data strategies and policies. Fun fact about me, I caused a complete storm in IBM relatively recently because I have a horse, I ride a horse, that's my thing, and I happened to mention someone that I was going to badminton, and meaning I was going to badminton, I was going to watch. And a rumour went round that I was an international show jumper. And there was an international show jumper called Mark Davies, and it went ballistic through IBM that they'd employed their chief medical officer as an international. And it was really difficult unpacking it. It's not me.
And Jordan, we know who you are, but you're not exempt from a fun fact.
Okay, fun fact. So I started a dad band with a bunch of guys in my neighborhood. I played guitar. We named the band because after we put the kids to bed, we'd all go play. And after 6 years, it was unsurfaced that the singer had been sleeping with the bass player's wife for many, many years. And the band broke up, of course, or at least we kicked the singer out. So then you're in a real band when that happens. And we renamed the band Aftermath.
Well, that went in directions I wasn't quite expecting. So we're going to play a little bit of a game because these sessions can sometimes be a bit kind of hot and stuffy. So we've unfortunately picked on people that looked like they would have quite good speaking voices. And what we're going to do is go through phrases of the Hippocratic Oath. A member of the audience is going to say that Hippocratic Oath in the most Hippocratical way that they possibly can, and then we are going to discuss it and have some questions. So who has Hippocratic Oath number 2? Right, Zara's going to run quickly and put a microphone under your nose and read it in your most Hippocrates-like voice.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I would say it in Greek, actually, if you had it in Greek. But so I will apply, for the benefit of the sick, all measures which are required, avoiding those twin traps of overtreatment and therapeutic nihilism.
Perfect. Gobbledygook. Thank you very much. So this is all about overtreating, and this is something that's come up already. Euan, I know this is something you care quite a lot about. That we've got these algorithms that are supposedly black box. You feed them with thousands, or hundreds of thousands of features, and clinically they're very, very difficult to interpret. So what should kind of engineers and data scientists be really thinking about when you're building some of these models that it doesn't even have to be a neural network, it can just be a linear regression. Like, how do you start to approach those in order for them to be clinically relevant?
In order to navigate the mountains of BS in the area, and there are significant mountains, I would recommend that we actually engage with clinicians. God forbid we actually go interdisciplinary, and actually ask the question, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to classify a disease? Are we trying to gain a risk profile? In terms of moving on, this is why we're developing synthetic data, is everyone has an algorithm. How good is it? Can it deal? And in terms of interpretability, I would go towards the Richmond Feynman idea of, well, how does the algorithm work? It minimises the mathematical function. Okay. But why does it arrive at its decision? Well, that's much more of an interesting question. That's a statistical question. Does it correlate with genetic factors? Is it an interaction, 3-way, 4-way, infinite way? So it's not just a case of, oh, that's the most common feature. No, that's not how it works. Look up Leo Breiman's work on algorithmic modelling, not fall into the trap of causal reasoning, because ML is not causal reasoning. So that would be my thoughts on it.
I think there's also the question of, if you think about overtreatment, there's the question of validity and utility. So, validity is the algorithm, as you are assessing, can the algorithm actually detect the thing it's detecting? And then utility is, does it actually improve outcomes? And there was a paper published recently where they looked at detecting atrial fibrillation, not AF, not using an acronym, in patients in the ICU. And they
just use an acronym.
And they found that So they looked at basically clinical and subclinical atrial fibrillation, and the subclinical is defined by, it was detected by the algorithm but not by the clinician. And they found there was actually no improvement in outcomes in detecting that subclinical atrial fibrillation versus just the clinical one. So, the algorithm could detect it and it was valid, but it wasn't actually useful, and therefore there's the risk when you get atrial fibrillation, you treat it, and there's a risk of treating it. So I think that's really important to consider as well.
If everyone just spoke in like a slightly more sinister tone, this kind of like creepy, eerie music would work quite well. So can you all just like be creepy in your answers? So I know that obviously Jordan raised this about over-treating. So as we become kind of more dependent on algorithmic-based decision-making, how is that going to potentially exacerbate the kind of over-treatment that we're currently seeing across medicine? Is it open to anyone?
Well, I think if you look at the structures that build up knowledge in the healthcare practices, is to understand how much you know about a population and how much an intervention works for an entire population. And it's understood that that intervention is not going to work for everyone in that population anyway. However, this is the information that the healthcare teams have at their disposal, so they're treating entire populations in the same way. The trick is to understand the individual, give the individual the tools that they can bring the information back to their care teams and have a discussion about how medicine can be personalised for them. If you do not have that capability, then the tools are blunt. The tools that the healthcare system has treat everyone in the same way.
And the performance of the algorithms is worse as well, if you're not necessarily basing it on the pre-test probability of the person that you're looking at as well. So,
Yeah, and I think just to talk about this, I mean, everyone's asking me out in Silicon Valley, should I get a full body MRI? The crazy quantified self people. And the discussion I have with them is, you have to understand what the pre-test probability is statistically and what the false positive rate is. And if the pre-test probability is less than the false positive rate, you should not do that test. You will find a bunch of things that you're going to then go on a medical safari with risk and cost money. And so, but people, with the internet, you press a button, we have a remote control for everything on our phone right now. We want stuff to happen now. We don't have the ability to go slow anymore. And in medicine, you need to go slow.
Yeah. So can I ask, is there something helpful we can do up here for... Okay, no, cool, perfect. Just let us know if we can do anything like jump mics around or something. Who has Hippocratic Oath number 3? This lady here. A microphone will be running to you immediately in this kind of creepy horror show we've got going on here.
Okay. I will remember that there is art to medicine as well as science, and that warmth, sympathy, and understanding may outweigh the surgeon's knife or the chemist's drug.
Perfectly narrated. So, in medicine, is there an art to medicine, or was there an art just because we had incomplete medicine? We should start with you, Cosima.
I think that's a really fantastic question, because I think that probably, I'd say that yes, there's definitely an art to medicine which is all about the healing and the empathy and the patient-doctor communication side of it. But I think that there may be a piece of it which is true, which is that medicine over the last 100 years has moved from being experience-based medicine and intuition-based medicine to evidence-based medicine. And so, historically, I think there was an art because there wasn't a science. I think we're in a better spot now. But I think there still is a huge art component. And I think the thing that I'm interested in and kind of worried about is when you look at technologies that there's a big kind of burgeoning realm of remote patient monitoring, and Mindstrong does that, and there's a lot of other, particularly in cardiology. I worry that as we start to, do a lot of medicine which is kind of disconnected from the doctor and at a distance, you lose that art. It becomes the management of kind of people on dashboards. And I think that's one thing that I would be worried about with this.
Do you know, if you walk down the road, you'll come to the Royal College of General Practitioners, my college, and the motto, I'm not going to tell you what it is in Latin, is empathy with science. And for me, that kind of encapsulates really nicely the practice of medicine. Because do you know what? We've got machines, and there's big boxes and computers around this conference which are really clever, doing really, really clever things. But you know what? We do really clever things as well. People, judgment, empathy, connections, communication, values. there is an experience, a human experience of healthcare that goes to the heart of dealing with someone who, as you were talking about before, is anxious or in pain or feeling vulnerable, or actually just really struggling or is just frightened. And actually, the human ability to hold somebody professionally while they go through the experience of illness or indeed the experience of dying is something that we mess with at our peril. We mustn't lose that kind of that kernel of humanity in what is essentially an emotional experience. Now, I do the job that I do because I believe that the practice of medicine can be augmented. I think we should talk about augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence in this world. But we can do things smarter, faster, safer, cheaper, in a more scalable way. But for heaven's sake, folks, let's not forget the people.
Yeah, I think it's so the headlines tend to get grabbed by you're getting a full body MRI, full genomic sequencing, but the advantages of the ubiquity of people having phones in their pockets is that they can capture this information and share it. So there's an inequity involved in kind of the education, access to finance. But there's an equality associated with everyone's access to the smartphone technology that they carry around. So the ability to take this information and share it is something that can be interpreted by doctors. So not to replace the doctor, but to augment the conversation and the collaboration that the doctor and the care teams can have with the individual. And I think that's where we're going to see the biggest gains for the most number of people.
And when you say empathy, empathy doesn't happen without two people, and it doesn't happen without communication. And so if you look at all the biggest companies in the world today, they're all communications companies. If I asked you to all look at your phones and ask you what the apps you use the most, it's going to be all communication apps. All of them. 90% of the time you're communicating with people. We wake up, we go to sleep, and all we do is communicate all day long. In healthcare, we're trying to eliminate communication with algorithms a lot of the time. And the truth is that's why this concept of digital empathy, which I've been really trying to understand, is how do you communicate to somebody that you understand them? Because empathy is really putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And so we have to remember that with all the data and all the algorithms, this stuff needs to be communicated to somebody. And it is how you communicate it to them that is really the magic of medicine. And that's the art. It's not what you communicate, it's how.
And just get really transactional about this for a moment. If there's a currency to the practice of medicine, it's probably time. That's the thing we haven't got. And one of the real kind of challenges around medicine is trawling through large amounts of data, whether that be patient data in terms of kind of records, which are often poorly organised and not prioritised, or it's around current best practice, guidelines, evidence, or scholarly publishing. So the sheer volume of stuff that you need to get through to make real-time decisions is really difficult, and it gives you hardly any time to be empathic, to communicate and understand the patient's perspective. So I think one of the really exciting things around this discussion is freeing up more time for the human bits of medicine. Let's let the computers do the stuff that they can do really cleverly. They're great at doing natural language processing and contextualizing, creating ontologies and presenting contextually relevant information. Whoa, game on.
Is that what IBM does, yeah?
No.
Other providers are available.
And what that frees us up to do is to have the conversation and say, do you know what are your priorities? What are you worried about? And what are you hoping to get out of this?
I think I challenge that a little bit, which is to say that the really sexy problems in healthcare, and we're kind of going a little off-piste on this oath, so we'll come back to it in a second, but the sexy problems in healthcare are AI, are automating a lot of the really interesting intellectual work that it means to be a doctor. It's incredibly satisfying and rewarding when you learn stuff and then you're able to come up with your answers. And that's the sexy thing to automate. What's not sexy to automate is the translating of information across information systems, is the interoperability between all of these platforms that doctors use. And one of the things that I'd be concerned about is that we start to remove all of the interesting work and then we don't do the connecting and doctors just become the human connection. And so we may free up time, but actually we may spend a lot of our time just translating data from one AI into another machine and then maybe have some time to talk to the patient. So I'm not sure I'm quite so optimistic about that future. But
Let me have another quick bite. Sorry, Maxine.
We need to move on. We've got so many oaths to go
I
through.
know. I just should declare I never have taken the Hippocratic Oath. Most
Don't
graduates
be
in
Mark's
the UK.
patients, that's what I tell you.
apparently, according to Jordan, you need to. So you do that at the end.
Yeah. So most clinicians in the UK don't. So, one of the other, so building on what you just said, one of the really interesting things is actually not caregivers' times, professional or otherwise, but patients' time.
Yeah.
And you ask someone who's having renal replacement therapy how much of their life is spent in patient transport, booking patient transport, waiting on outpatients, waiting for this to happen, trying to get through on the phone, yada yada yada. If this was another industry, we would have revolutionised that. Not 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So, thinking about modern flows, thinking about supply chain, thinking about automation for the back office governs, which has such a massive impact on patient experience.
So we move from art to back governs. We're going to move on to the next oath, sorry. Who has oath number 6 and 7? We're going to have a duel standing up, right? So both of you stand up. We're going to not have microphones, which means you've got to be so theatrical and you've got to project so much. You're going to be like that thespian wanker you all hated at university, but who was really good at Hamlet. Be that guy. Okay, so who's number 6? Right, go ahead. Now we're talking.
I will remember that I do not treat a fever chart, a cancerous growth, but a sick human being, whose illness may affect the person's family and economic stability. My responsibility includes these related problems, if I am to care adequately for the sick.
Round of applause for that guy. No pressure.
I will prevent disease whenever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure.
Good, straight to the point. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So this is a really important thing about the fact that doctors, by and large, do feel they have a monopoly on well-being. Yet only 15% of outcomes are related to treatments. So, what sort of professional support can be given to the medical profession so that that balance of 85% to 15% is shifted, because doctors no longer have that monopoly on well-being.
Well, I'll jump in real quick. I'm a huge fan of prevention. I think biology and physiology is incredibly predictable. More predictable than markets, more predictable than a lot of things in this world. And so if you understand what you're doing and who you are, you can see the future. You can see the future illness you're going to have if you don't do something or you keep doing something. And the number one cause of disease in the world today is processed food. So we're struggling to fight against a multi-trillion-dollar agriculture industry that's pushing chemicals and hijacking our brains with dopamine with processed food. So, I think that at the highest level, we need to focus on educating people that what they put in their body is causing future disease.
So there's a bit of a problem in healthcare, in the design of healthcare, because we've kind of bought into the myth that the way to improve the health and well-being of our populations is to have really well-run organisations, well-regulated, financially robust and well-run organisations, and professionals that are well-regulated and meet a load of standards. And do you know what? It's complete tosh. If you start the exam question looking at the components of healthcare, you might get operational efficiency really good, but you go nowhere near allocative efficiency. So how you use the resources in order to answer the exam question about how you improve the wellness of a population. The reality is what we do is we spend a lot of time treating people and treating illness, and then if there's any money left at the end, we could do a bit of prevention. Yeah. The way to change this is to swing the telescope round, so to stop thinking about organisations and professions and institutions and to start thinking about populations. And there is a global movement around, it's called different things in different parts of the world, but essentially place-based care, population health, accountable care, integrated care systems, yada yada. Basically what it is starting with the needs and priorities of a population, being really sighted around the measurement of outcomes and understanding the groups and segments within those populations, and then designing your system with the resources that you've got available to maximize the outputs. Now have that conversation, and that puts prevention right at the heart of the conversation. And many of the most interesting conversations that I have around the world in the role that I'm currently in is conversations around communities and neighborhoods and populations, often using digital platforms to turn that telescope round the other way and have that end of the conversation, which is really exciting.
So I think it's a really, really interesting point, and I agree with it, but there is something, a fundamental issue in there, which is if you want that level of personalised medicine, you would need to track genetics, you would need to track heart rate, you would need to track a phenomenal amount of data, which would be incredibly invaluable. But if you do develop some form of algorithm that can infer huge populations, we do population statistics, but if you want to get to the point where you can go, actually, you're at risk, 60% risk of a heart attack, you're then invading in the doctor's area. You're saying that you are likely to have a heart attack. So then it's up, you have to go and visit the clinician, you have to go and, well, this says it's going to have it, but you're saying I'm not. So there's a fundamental disconnect around, do you want large population prevention, do you want backroom prevention, or do you want incredibly personalised healthcare? And if you do want the personalised healthcare, we need to be fundamentally cleverer about how we collect our data. The data we're synthesising is standard hospital admissions. Interesting, but not very preventative by definition.
But is it possible just to not focus on getting a full set of kind of biological, genomic, MRI data for all of these subjects, but getting a small amount of data and engaging a wider group of people? So something that we come up against in our work, even when we've been asked to focus on a population with dementia or depression, is a belief within the wider team, including healthcare practitioners, that whatever is created will not engage that population. Okay, you're working with people with dementia, but they're not going to use it. They're not going to. But we found, to kind of break down those barriers, iterative, human-centered design development can allow you to focus on the needs of the individual and take a lesson from Formula One. It's not about knowing everything that happens, it's about knowing the right data at the right time. And this may be a tiny amount of data from an individual.
I just want to build on that, because I think so at Mindstrong, a lot of what we're doing is prevention. We're helping prevent people going into the ER, which is bad for the patient, bad for the insurer. And one of the things we found is that actually the biggest thing that causes that confers the highest risk of a hospital admission is homelessness. And in fact, higher than homelessness is being in a shelter. And you don't need to know all of this information about the patient. It's much more about knowing what is the thing that you're trying to prevent, and then what's the kind of the biggest moving piece of data that you can use for that. And then can you do something about it? Because that's the next challenge: is how do you then solve that problem for these people?
Very sorry, we are being ushered off stage. We had so many things we wanted to talk about. I know that Jordan had 8 of his own new Hippocratic Oaths, which was very greedy of him, and I did task you with coming up with your own Hippocratic Oath. So as we are about to come off stage, I would love to hear a whip round of what, if you were to add one Hippocratic Oath to the current oath, what would it be? And then we will race off stage so that Zara doesn't kill me.
Thou shalt not talk to the marketing team first before having consulted the clinical and engineering teams extensively, on pain of eating bran muffins for a week in the office.
I will endeavour to maintain and improve my skills and training, even in the face of tools that become better at medicine than me.
Very good.
I really loved Jordan's idea that everyone involved in healthcare, which is everybody, should have to take some form of oath. But it would be nice to kind of to pledge for people to understand the individual where they are, and to understand that no person is an island.
Thank you. So I'm not keen on oaths.
I think you've made that clear, Mark.
I believe very strongly in how I'm regulated, which is the code of conduct, the duties of a doctor, the general medical council. So I'd want to add one into there. And what the duty that I would like to add into there is to be humble enough to stop pretending that we can remember everything when we're dealing with patients.
And Jordan, you had 8. You've got your fair share. Okay. Anyway, can we have a huge round of applause for our speakers? Many thanks.